Well, I think TEEBS, of course, somehow was one of the major players putting natural capital back on the agenda and introducing the concept, leading up to 2010, the CBD COP 2010. And there's a linkage in that way because WAVES was launched at the CBD COP 2010. We've now worked 6 years with 8 countries, helping them to move forward on the natural capital accounting agenda. And there's a clear linkage on natural capital ecosystems, ecosystem valuation, and the role these play in the economy of developing countries. We engage in a country where there's high level interest in moving forward with natural capital accounting. So that interest really has to come from the ministries of finance or ministries of development planning. Normally we set up a national high level steering committee, which is normally chaired by the ministries of finance and development planning, which includes all sectoral players, institutions which deal with environmental information in the country, economic information in the country, statistics agencies in the country. There's a scoping study, so the country basically defines its own priorities. I think that's central. So the work needs to be defined and prioritized by the country, and the country sets its own priorities. They set out a work program. The WAVES engagement is normally, say, 4 to 5 years. And for the 5 first countries, we are now in the process of evaluating and assessing where we've gone. And it depends on, the circumstances vary. We work with Costa Rica, Colombia, Madagascar, Botswana, and the Philippines. Some countries are really having challenges. Madagascar, political challenges, is very difficult. They've struggled. Some countries have a good foundation to start from, like Botswana, and you actually see a situation where you're very close to integrating environmental accounts into the broader economic frameworks in that country. I think it's mainly comes from the fact that many of the countries who are involved in WAVES are highly dependent on natural resources, natural capital for their economies. So I think the whole engagement from the very beginning is driven by their own interest to manage their asset in a more sustainable way. I think that's sort of the starting point. When you work on it, I think what we have seen is that the work on the natural capital accounting in many countries, it's actually improved the understanding and information on the different sectors, the priority sectors they are involved in and interested in. We've seen many cases where the information actually has clear linkages or improved even the information they have, and they base their national accounts and GDP measures on. So I think in most cases the appreciation is that the understanding, the facts, and the integration of the information that they have into the frameworks that they use for development planning and decision making are improved. I don't think we can say that because of this figure or that figure that's sort of a game changer, but I think they see they get a more diversified and more accurate picture of how the economy is constituted. I think the first phase was really putting natural capital accounting on the global agenda. I think there was a major focus on pushing also the global agenda on it. It's really trying to build a critical mass of countries, developing countries especially, who would have experience and work on natural capital accounts. We worked with 8 countries. In the course of the evolving agenda, the landscape is totally different today than it was in 2010. Natural capital accounting is discussed everywhere. The program has not been able to respond to a lot of requests of countries who want to become WAVES countries, that is, getting support for implementing natural capital accounting. I think the second phase is really there's 3 components. We continue with work in countries, expanding from 8 to 16 countries, adding another 8 countries to the program. That's one thing. But then in order to reach out to more countries and also institutionalize to some extent at a regional scale the experience that we've already generated, we have a regional component in the second phase. That is really South-South, facilitating country-to-country learning, facilitating regional building of regional capacity experience on natural capital accounting. There's a global component also looking at still, advancing experimental ecosystem accounting towards a standard, and we're trying to see what's the added value that the bank can bring to it. I think we also will work more strategically with a pragmatic eye on how we can advance the policy impact of accounting, really transferring structured statistics, the accounts, to information for decision makers in a strategic manner. What measures need to be put in place in each country for that to happen? And then there's still some work on advancing the global agenda, but as we all know, natural capital is all over the place these days, so which is very good. Well, the bank for the bank, the SDGs, like the MDGs, have been a major driver of how we engage and act with client countries. So it's important. I think we're all aware that environmental accounts, for instance, really can generate a huge amount of information that can be used as indicators for monitoring the targets. I understand that process of defining the indicators is still sort of ongoing. Once that is clear, I think with the countries we will engage, of course the SDGs will be part of what we will be looking at. I think there's 4 things that we want from this country engagement. We really want to generate an ability to work with central framework accounts on sectors like forests or water or minerals, but also expose them to ecosystem accounting, because that's where we're moving towards. But also for the countries to have the ability to link these accounts to macroeconomic frameworks, either the national accounts or SDGs as one example, or as we've seen in some countries who are in the OECD accession process or having green growth programs, green growth indicators. So, and the 4th thing is really this policy. How do you translate, the accounts to policy? But the SDGs will be part of that, and in that discussion with the country, we will engage in. But it's definitely one important aspect. I think the challenge is really I think we know a lot about values and valuation and the value of ecosystems. We have lots of information. I think we're pretty far in the demonstration phase of what we have. Really the challenge is to integrate it into the processes which eventually define development decisions or economic decisions. So, and that we see, because when you get down to it, it's about data, understanding how people and institutions use data for decision making, how institutions collaborate, how that data is presented, how do you actually move from these data institutions into information which is usable for decision makers. I think the data decision making interface is certainly a serious thing that we need to look at in a more effective way. And the fact that NCA, like I'm talking about natural capital accounting or SIA, it's not a solution. It's not a solution to everything. I mean, there's many other economic analysis, ways of dealing with issues which are of importance for environmental or economic policies. But I think the accounts are a good way when you really seriously want to transform your underlying, your basic information for managing an asset, a sector, a natural resource. And that's where it can play a role. But I think one needs to manage expectation also a little bit. You know, it's not a solution to all the problems we have in the world, not even in the environment sector.